Good evening and live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the sun and fun capital of the world and a great place to live. This is Dr. John Stamey, and I want to say welcome to tonight's ScaryCast. We have got a phenomenal show. We normally have good shows. This is a phenomenal show. I have been so excited about this for about a week. So, first of all, I want to introduce my co host extraordinaire, Dr. Trey Dunaway from the Midlands of South Carolina. How are you, Dr. Trey?
I'm doing fine, John, and I'm glad I could make the call.
We are glad you could make the call too. I especially wanted you to be on here because this seemed like you would enjoy it and bring a lot to the table. Tonight, this is a gentleman that I spoke to first about 10 days ago. Dan Shaw, who is a proponent and explorer of ley lines, told me that I needed to talk to Pete Champoux. And I said, okay, I'll bite. So I called him up. And lo and behold, he answered. And we had the most amazing conversation about ley lines and sacred geometry. I've talked to him twice more since in the last 10 days. It's been such a pleasure every time because as everybody on who listens to ScaryCast knows, I am the perpetual learner. And this gentleman has got so much that I can learn about in terms of ley lines and sacred geometry. I want to give a hearty ScaryCast welcome to the man from Michigan, Pete Champoux. How are you doing tonight, Pete?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's really a great opportunity to speak to folks down south. Yeah, I'm really happy to be on. Thanks for having me on, John.
You are welcome, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope we have you back many times because we tend to have people back as long as they're having fun. So you got a pretty good crew tonight, I think, and so we'll have a good time. Now, the first thing I've got a couple first off questions, and then we'll just let the conversation goes where it may. The first thing I want to ask you is tell everybody, because not a lot of people, not a lot of our listeners will know this, explain ley lines and explain, if you would, their relationship to sacred geometry and what is sacred geometry. Those are, I'd say 2 weeks ago, I didn't know these answers. I am thrilled that I've learned and I'm learning more every day. So Pete, take it away.
Take it away. Yeah, let's try to compress 20 years of 30, 40, 50 years of study into let's see, ley lines. They are a cultural and natural feature alignment over a distance. They were popularized in England with the megalithic societies that were prevalent there in southern England. Stonehenge is part of the ley system. It's been researched quite extensively since Mr. Hawkins. He was Alfred Hawkins. Alfred Hawkins. He first discovered these alignments in South England when he was selling insurance and found that all along these lines there are all these old family farms with the surnames ending in Ley, Ley. So he figured that, well, these must be ley keepers. Ley is kind of the lay of the land, this type of thing. So that term caught on, and it got picked up by John Michel, and he wrote a few early books about it and really popularized it in modern era. You know, he really inspired me. Ley lines, they're thought to be only in England by the English, but if they exist in England, they have to exist everywhere else. So ley lines are kind of like, if you want to say, like anthropomorphize the Earth to attribute human characteristics to the Earth, you would say that ley lines are meridians or nerve systems or something of that nature, where there's a communication between various sacred sites. So it appears to be a worldwide system that employs sacred sites to maintain the world. So we have, ceremonies, rituals, dance, prayers, honorings happening on these sacred sites, and they're all connected via ley lines. So when you look at ley lines, there's often underground water that flows, feet to yards to. It can be quite deep, but from the latest research, there's whole oceans, multiple oceans worth of water underneath the Earth's surface. So,
I've got to stop you and make a note here.
Okay.
Brooks Agnew is a very good friend of ours. He is the hollow earth guy. He is the one that knows all about the oceans underneath the oceans. And I've just seen some recent research come out. So I tell you what, Pete, I'm going to get you and Brooks together on another broadcast of ScaryCast to discuss that very topic, because he is very knowledgeable. He's a PhD nuclear physicist, but he is very knowledgeable about that topic. And also, I will say it makes a lot of sense that there would be some running water, because I know that I take my dowsing rods and I can find running water. I can find spirits in houses. That's all I will say on that. But I think there's a perfect correlation between the two. So please continue. I just wanted to get that on the broadcast so that I wouldn't forget.
Great. So many of these lays are connected with volcanoes and granite plutons, which are the roots of volcanoes that the glaciation has removed the top of. And like Pilot Mountain's like a 3 billion year old volcano that was eroded away, and what's we see as the remnant is just the granite core. Now, those granite cores link to the mantle, and there's a ringwoodite layer down about 200 to 600 miles down, and ringwoodite is a mineral that has a lot of water in it. It's like 15% water. So every time there's a volcano erupting, that there's a channel of water called primary water that comes up along with the volcano. So you often find hot springs and pure springs too, and non-mineralized springs associated with volcanoes that are primary water. And so there's a lot of ley lines. You might look at them as like a fountain of energy coming up out of the earth. So those are nodes, if you will. What I've been finding is that these earth rings. We're going to discuss a Pilot Mountain earth ring, and at the center of that we have this volcano with ley lines crossing it, a Pilot Mountain. And the way it presents is very similar to a integral membrane protein that we find on cells. The cell membrane have these communication portals that exchange information between the bio and the interior of the cell, and it excretes something, or it does the cell thing. Trey can probably speak better to how a cell operates than I, but being a doctor, and but it has that anthropomorphized sense to it, that the Earth is a living being, and it has these integral membrane plutons on its membrane. Dr. Bruce Lipton found that if you remove the nucleus from a cell, the cell still operates for a period of time, because the brains of the cell are in the membrane. So we have this brain, the Earth brain, if you will, is the membrane of the planet, and we're part of that. We're an integral part of that as a consciousness field. We're thought forms of the Earth. So then part of that question was, well, where does sacred geometry come from? Right. And one of my discoveries is that water, if you take the geometry of water, which has a bonding angle of 104 degrees H2, the two molecules of, or two atoms of hydrogen connecting to the oxygen, they connect at 104.5 degrees. So if you take that 104.5 degree and cut it in half, you have the Great Pyramid nested in there. So you find and that generates a heptagon, which is a 7-pointed geometry. It generates a vesica Pisces, which is 2 intersecting circles. Kind of the premise of Gothic cathedrals. So that the whole interrelationship of the cell, the sizes, dimensions of the cell, and the various atoms involved there generate geometry, generate the basic sacred geometries, which are the very simple polygons like hexagon and octagon and pentagon, and the vesica Pisces, of course, generates the whole seed of life geometric, which is like a mother geometry. So water is really it's the great progenitor of sacred geometry. And anything that water touches, it imparts that geometry to it. And then DNA takes over and gravity takes over. So like in the case of the Pilot Mountain Wheel, we have 8 points, and so that's that's water acting on it. In Africa, you have like multiple volcanic vents around Africa, and when you look at how they're arrayed around the massive area of Africa, they present in a pentagon. So it's just the process of nature. It's as simple as that.
It's as Benoit Mandelbrot said, it's the fractal geometry of nature. That's what you're talking. I had not thought about it, but that was integral to my master's thesis at Clemson University as the fractal geometry of nature. And now we've got some more things to discuss. I'll be talking to you about that next time. Dr. Trey, that was a little bit interesting, I think, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I do have some questions. In England, where you found these various family farms, the word "ley" was attached to the end. It was like a tag on all these farms.
Yeah, like Finlay, Conlay, Mark, Marley. Joseph Marley, the ghost with the chains on, and Scrooge.
Right.
Yeah.
And did they, when they named Marley, were they cognizant of the fact that they named it Ley because it was on a ley line?
Well, it was the observation of this man that these surnames were associated with these locales.
And are there any surnames with ley in them that are not on the ley line, or did the majority of them line up with the ley lines that were later determined to be present?
Well, of course, the families moved around.
Right,
England
right.
likes to have wars, and there's give and takes of populations. It was just that he found a preponderance. There were other names associated along these lays, but he just found a preponderance of this surname.
So if you were looking at a scatter diagram, you'd have a density of scatter along those ley lines.
That's what he found. Yes, this was in the late 1800s that he was working.
And can you detect the presence of a ley line?
You can detect it via dowsing. That's what most people use.
Okay.
There was a phenomenal study done by Hamish Miller. He followed the Michael Mary Ley, or the Grand Ley, across southern England, It goes from Land's End all the way to the other, going northeast, following the plane of the sunrise plane of the May sunrise. And in dowsing that, he found that there was a meander that these lays carried, one masculine and one feminine. So he called it Michael and Mary Lay. And then where they crossed, he inevitably found standing stones or old churches or man-made mounds, Stonehenge, Avebury, things of this nature were along this pathway.
Yeah, and it's hard to ask the builders of Stonehenge if they use dowsing rods to figure out where to place it.
Yeah, it seems
probably,
as though
probably hard to get an interview with those folks.
It is, yeah. But the archaeological record shows that the bone mass and structure of the people that were part of this megalithic culture improved. Mm-hmm. So it suggests that what they were, there has to be a reason for such a prodigious effort of moving these massive rocks around.
And there's got to be a real reason to put. I mean, it's not like they built it next to the quarry. They chose a particular spot for whatever reason, and if they could perceive the ley line as something that was important to them, that's where they'd put it, I guess.
Very specific kind of rock that was used, a rock that has a higher charge, higher piezoelectric charge, and they're placing it on so that's electric, if you will, and they're placing it in the chalk bedrock, the limestone of southern England, which is dielectric. So you have electric dielectric charges happening, which recent research have found that when you combine those two charges, you improve plant growth. So I think that back in the megalithic period, there was a different kind of atmosphere that was more charged, and these ley lines were actually harvesting sky nitrogen, lightning, if you will, in order to fertilize the field, because you can't. There's only so much common ore you can move around. So something of that nature, and then there was a collapse of civilization worldwide. It looks like there was a real shift in the environment. When you have all the collapse of all the American civilizations, plus this megalithic civilization, indicates that there was a kind of an increase of radiation that like a collapse of the earth energies, if you will.
Right.
So.
Well, we still have examples of that. You talked about if the cell loses its nucleus, it does have independent functions that will eventually wear out, and the cell dies, and it can't reproduce if it doesn't have a nucleus. So, it'll be the death of a cell. And the same thing's going on today in Washington, D.C., in the Congress. If Congress is the nucleus of the United States, I think about half of them seem to be brain dead. So I think it's the same thing you could apply to politics.
Yeah, that entropy and coherence thing that keeps cycling around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, have you explored ley lines in the United States or in other locations? Does this hold to civilizations in South America that are the remains are there, but we don't really have much of a written record about the construction of those structures?
In South America, it was highly used. They were called seques down there, and there were alignments that ran all over the Incan Empire that they worked with and put stones on and sacred sites on. There's one up there in Machu Picchu. There's one rock there that has multiple seques that have been detected, and that when you follow them out, they connect with all these various, seque woman. They're outside of Cusco and down into Peru and all those sites down there.
Well, we've always known about, developing knowledge for Stonehenge with celestial observations, and I imagine the same is true for some of the Mayan temples that remain, and the Mayan cities and layouts of Central American and South American civilizations. So celestial is one way, but it's not at all inconceivable to think that if the ancients could detect something beyond celestial to orient to, then the other side of the celestial would be Terra. So it does make sense.
Yeah, the star knowledge. Yeah, the Lakota people are very keen on star knowledge, where they would migrate around sacred sites. Every year they would have different places that they would need to be when there was a certain constellation on the horizon, where they were to do ceremony at various places. So so that's an act of connecting, star energy, which is the biology that the cell is immersed in, Earth's cell is immersed in, and these sacred sites are the conduit for the conveyance of information from star knowledge through the human spiritual experience into the planet.
I can't remember the name of it. It's art. It's the perfect rectangle. I can't. My art history is scarce, but when you look at the dimensions of a rectangle, there is a perfect rectangle from the Greek.
Yeah, it's called the phi rectangle, PHI. It has a ratio of 1 to 1.618 ...
Right. And is that related? Does that number fold into the other sacred geometry numbers that you talk about? Is there a mathematical relationship between the phi and other sacred geometry or sacred geometry?
Well, for instance, the pent has phi throughout it. It's the width to the cross beam, or it's all about phi. There's phi everywhere. So
Right.
when a wizard casts a spell, they draw a pentagram around their sigils, and it gives it enlivens the spell. Similarly, the pentagon is a phi proportion geometric that gave life and energy to counter the swastika, which is more of a ancient vortex symbol. But the human body, as you might be aware, as a physician, is all proportioned according to phi. The most beautiful face has phi proportions throughout it. The common book that, like a paperback book that we read, is in a phi proportion in order for it to sit in our hands well and feel comfortable in our hands as we read. And it's also comfortable for the eye to look at.
Right.
It's an epitome of beauty. And the Greeks were all about it. They incorporated phi in all their sacred geometry and buildings. And it's, when you incorporate sacred geometry into a civilization, they typically have a fairly good run of it.
Well, you look at China with Feng Shui. That's been around forever, and it from my limited knowledge about it, it just means things are the way they ought to be. And if you put something out of Feng Shui, then it just is not. You just sense that no, you need to rearrange the furniture because it doesn't really work with whatever you've set up. So same type of feeling. You and people perceive that without being taught. So it must be something that we are tuned to when we can see if something is in alignment or out of alignment, if something feels right or doesn't feel right, or has the right proportions or doesn't have the right proportions. It's tuned to the human perception of that, maybe.
Exactly. Absolutely. DNA, when you look down the spiral of DNA, when you stretch
the
it
double
out
helix, right? Double helix.
It's just, there's phi. It's all about phi in there. the way the codons, I'm not sure quite.
Yes.
Yeah, the way they are all linked together, they have like a square, a hexagon, and a phi ratioed. I think that's it. A phi ratioed bar there, and so there's all this phi right within DNA. So we have geez, how much DNA do we have in our bodies? The 12 billion miles worth of this stuff, and so that it's like an antenna system coiled up within us that can reach out to the heliosphere in length, and so we're a frequency system, if you will. With our glial body, we have our neuron body, which has 9 attendant glial cells that operate on frequency and calcium ion. So you have this kind of a attenuator there, and an antenna system, and an electrical system that sparks it all. It's really an elegant. Geez, who figured this one out?
Well, and the body is the way the body is for a very good reason, because it works.
It works. What a it's intelligent design. It has to be.
Right. And it was really interesting. Today, a friend of mine sent me a little video talking about the heart, how the heart is the major electrical body, or the major electrical organ in the body. It's not the brain. How the heart sends out more messages than the brain. How the electrical field, thanks to the heart and the pulsing of the heart, is almost 4 feet, which would be, I guess, 4 feet radius around the human body. And I think the phi ratio you were talking about, that's what we would normally call in mathematics the golden ratio. Is
Yes.
that correct, Steve?
Yes.
That's another word for sure. Thank you for that.
Right. That's again, fractal geometry of nature. All we talked about was the golden ratio, and that's what that was. I know some of our listeners will have understood that, and so it's just amazing. So I guess the thing that I learned about ley lines is there is essentially an electrical field that connects a lot of things, and the St. Michael's ley line, which seems to run through England, and it runs through France and Italy and through Greece and all the way down to Israel. Is that correct, Pete? I mean, that's what I have read.
Well, there's various. There's a connective line between Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. There's multiple ley lines there. There's quite an extensive system. France, it's all over France. Often there's more ley lines where there's limestone because there's more underground water, so it creates a kind of a electric dielectric charge, and so you got that underground flow that generates an above ground flow that mimics it, and so and those limestone deposits are like our glial cells, our planetary glial cells, and they communicate between one another, and the neurons are kind of like the granite, if you will, the piezoelectric granites that we have, and so the Great Pyramid has that granite at its core, and it's surrounded by all that water tuned limestone. It's I mean, the most obvious thing about the pyramid is that it's it's made to bond with the atmosphere, the oxygen. So it has an H2 geometry to it that bonds with the oxygen of the atmosphere. So it's all about water. A lot of people have said, well, it's a water pump, it's this kind of thing, it's that kind of thing. But nobody except me that I've ever found is, observed that the relationship between the water molecule and the Great Pyramid.
Wow, that's great. I've also heard that it is part of the 432 frequency of A, you know, A440 being what we tune pianos and orchestras to today, but that it is tuned or it resonates at A432. That's something we might want to discuss a little bit
Yeah,
later. I'm just
yeah.
now beginning to learn about that.
With the Great Pyramid, there's you have what, 8 lines coming off of it, 8 ley lines coming off, north, south, east, west, and then at the cross quarter edge alignments, and you follow those out, and they're ley lines, and you look at what's happening in for instance in Ukraine. Kyiv is right on the north line of the Great Pyramid, and what Putin wants to do is move the border of Russia right over to where that line goes through. So there's some kind of discordant frequency, I feel, that's taken over the Great Pyramid. Maybe it's because it lost its stones in that earthquake, but it's you look at ley lines, and you look for what's happening on those ley lines to determine its relative health. And just like a nerve, with neuropathy or something, it's so you look around, and there are all these genocidal things happening around the Great Pyramid in a radiance. And you take the southeast edge, and it goes right down to the Kaaba stone in Mecca. So it's associated with religious thought as well, the development of religion. So it's kind of, and it's also right now the Great Pyramid is looked at as a kind of a social proof of Darwinian economics or whatever. It's like top down, the royalty, the priest class. It's everybody needs royalty, so we got to have billionaires, and we got to have the slave class down the bottom, feeding upwards. And that's if we shift that pyramidal worldview from one of like a social hierarchy to what it really is a geometry of water, which we all are. It's more of a unifying force in the world, because we're all united by the water of the world. So.
Okay. Well, I'd like to take a short moment and thank our sponsor, Mind Zero, the sauna and cold plunge. They have, of course, their first location here in Myrtle Beach on South Kings Highway. They're opening in June in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, near Charleston. They're also going to be opening in Boulder, Colorado, Loudoun County, Virginia, and of course, Raleigh, North Carolina. Go Wolfpack. So we're going to have Mind Zero all over the place. They are a perpetual sponsor of ScaryCast. We are very proud to have them. I am an investor. I think it's a grand idea. That cold plunge is a little scary to me at 43 degrees after you've been in a 200-degree sauna, but promise you it won't kill you. So anyway, thanks to Mind Zero, we appreciate your support. So anyway, that's great. I've got another question that I would like to turn to you, Pete, to ask. And this is very important to me. This is personal experience. This has to do with where I hold several of my conferences, which is Rabun County, Virginia, county seat of Clayton. That's in, as I call it, northeast Georgia, but between where North and South Carolina, they form a little cove, and there is Rabun County. Now, I believe that there are ley lines involved. Now, when you look at the Pilot Mountain Wheel, and right now you can find the Pilot Mountain Wheel on bigfootandcompany.info, and you're going to be able to find it. I'm going to talk to Pete and get his permission to put the Pilot Mountain Wheel image several places, because I think people should enjoy it. And see, it's like 40 miles from my home, which is Winston-Salem. And the Pilot Mountain Wheel is headquartered there. And it has all these ley lines coming off of it. And one of them goes through Washington, D.C. And at that distance, you can find other things like, I think a Hare Krishna temple. You can find the Standing Stone State Park, which is famous for having more Bigfoot sightings than anywhere else in the world. And that's where Mary Green had her monthly meetings at Standing Stone. So it's just an amazing thing, the location of the Pilot Mountain Wheel. So anyway, Pete, my big question is this. If I were to go to Rabun County and with my copper dowsing rods, which are just sitting right over here, how would I go about finding the ley lines? If you don't mind, I hope I don't put you on the spot, but that's a question I've always wanted to ask you.
Well, it's hard to say without, going there and doing a study of it. But I have certain parameters that I incorporate in any of my studies. And, I look for cultural and natural signatures, springs, rock outcroppings, fault lines, relationships to others, to known sacred sites, how the plane of a mountain range might lay in relationship to the site. So it's really it's a full geographical assessment that I do, and it's I do it specifically so I don't have to use dowsing, because the skeptics always reject it because dowsing, it's all woo-woo stuff. And the dowsing is very much dependent on having a very, very clear channel with a very clear question that doesn't have multiple answers that can be gained from this. So you can go there and find a ley line. Have someone that knows what a ley line is energetically and dowses for them. And then once you are attenuated, once your DNA and glial is attenuated to what your body feels, what a ley line is, then you simply you use your rods. What I do is I use the length of my arm, which is considered a cubit, and then bend it at a phi ratio. That's how I do it. And you walk with the rods just angled just down a little bit, not up because it'll move too much, and not just parallel. And because if it's parallel, it'll swing too much with your movement. You want to have it just down towards the ground a little bit to give it a little bit of tension. And what I do is I ask, show me a ley line, and the rod will turn, and then I'll walk in that direction. And when it gives me a direction to go in, I turn in that direction and walk in that direction. And then when I cross a ley line, or whatever I'm looking for, missing keys or whatever, the rods cross for me. Some other people, they fold out, but for me they cross. It's a different it's it has a lot to do with your own bioelectric stuff that's going on. So
like, for example, we know where a UFO landed and stayed for 3 days in 1957 in Rabun County.
Yeah.
And I believe that must be at some type of a point, or at least on a ley line. So I would drive my car out there, get my dowsing rods, walk there and just start talking to it and say, show me the ley line that's associated with this, and see if I can follow the energy. Would that be, I don't care what anybody says, I will do it in 2 weeks. Would that be a reasonable way?
Yeah, absolutely. Just ask, the guide who's always there, help me find this ley line, and and then follow it. It'd be interesting to really douse that to see what if there's a geopathic kind of signature there, or a geobeneficial signature that was left by the.
What is geopathic and geo? What are those two terms? Please define them.
Well, it's pathy is illness, so the earth, like a sickness. Often, well, there's this one grid. There's a number of different grids, first off, and one of them is called the Hartman-Curry grid, which is more about the electrical body of the planet. It has to do with the electromagnetics of the planet, and so you have these telluric lines that run north-south, and these latitude lines, or longitude lines running north-south and latitude east-west. And it's this Curry grid is set up like that. Every, I think it's 3 feet north-south and 5 feet east-west, and they create these 5 ratio rectangles that every fifth one you have, or 30 feet, you have what's called a banker line, and those banker lines go out and they intersect with other banker lines out 10 units on the 3 foot length, 3 to 5, and if you were to sleep on those banker lines, it's found that you get leukemia and many illnesses. The work that they were doing with ley lines in England, John Michel and Rashad Field, they were college roommates, and they were looking at this one community that had a preponderance of cancers, and they found that one side of the street had all these cancers and the other one didn't, and they dowsed it out and found that there was these a geopathic ley line or a banker line that went along this. I'm not sure if they actually identified it as a banker line, but banker lines are very, very notorious for being illness generating. So so if you like have your easy chair over one of these geopathic zones, you tend to get illnesses and cancers and such. I'm not saying that everybody that has cancer. I mean, it's a product of modern living, cancer. I think foods I believe are the cause of cancer, but if you have a bio that is susceptible to it because of the foods that you eat, and then go to a spot that agitates those cells to generate a cancer. That's kind of my common sense conclusion on that. So going to this. Clayton is, and some wise guy once told me, say, Pete, if you put down every single energy line that exists in the world on a map, it would be all graphite. It's just energy is everywhere. It's just this, we're in a soup of it. And ley lines tend to be a focused alignment of that soup. So you follow it along, and I do studies along this line, and but I'd really have to go to Clayton to really give it a good answer of how to find it. I could map out the water lines, and often ley lines follow rivers. And that they follow the plane of mountain ranges. You're very much very close to what I call the Acadian Ley, which comes from Nova Scotia down to New Orleans area, down to Teotihuacan in Mexico City.
Right. It actually looks like it runs in the south part of Rabun County.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that that's I have this line, a straight line, but there's a waveforms that are associated with that are more the ley lines, like in the Michael Mary line. A ley line is a straight line of nodes, but between the nodes there's there can be this tremendous meander between the nodes. So and that plane of that ley line, that Acadian Ley that goes through Washington D.C. and New York City and Boston, Washington D.C. was intentionally placed on this line, just to be in alignment with all these other cities: Baltimore, Trenton, Philadelphia. It's all on the same line. So. But that line runs parallel to the Appalachian front, and so where Clayton is right there at the start of the Appalachians.
Right, it certainly is. I will let you know what I find when I go down there next. I believe it's
Great.
going to be the weekend after next. I will let you know. Okay, and I might want to call up and get a little free consulting one more time before I go down there. I think it's going to be fun. All right. Okay. First of all, we're getting close to our witching hour. I would like to ask Pete if he has one topic or one thing he would like to tell us, and then I'm going to let Dr. Trey Dunaway have the last question and the last word tonight on tonight's very special ScaryCast. So Pete Champoux, ley line expert and sacred geometry guy. Tell us something that we need to know, or ask, or give us a rhetorical question and answer it. Whatever you'd like to do. You are our guest, and we are thrilled to have you.
Well, I got on here to talk about the Pilot Mountain Wheel, so that was kind of I'd like to address that a little bit. And
please.
So I first came across these landscape geometries when I was living in New England, and found a very tight geometric that was the same that you find in Stonehenge, and that was nested there in the landscape of New England. So I said, well, if they exist in New England, they have to look like the ley lines of England. If they exist in New England, then they have to exist everywhere. So I started looking around and found that for a similar type of pattern and method that I used in Western Massachusetts as a centric point, and found that Pilot Mountain was the same. And how I determined that was by looking at the arc in the land itself. So with the Pilot Mountain Wheel, the arc that is showing to suggest that there's a circular form in the landscape is the Potomac River that comes through DC and arcs out through the Chesapeake Bay and around the Cape Hatteras and down to where Parris Island Marine Corps training is. And this is also divided by this Acadian Ley, which I was very familiar with at the time. And Pilot Mountain ended up being halfway between Washington, D.C. and Stone Mountain. So it suggested that there was this polarity that existed. And the midline, the dividing line going east-west, was the 3630 Missouri Compromise latitude. So that's what divided the North and the South. And in many ways, the two are still separated. We're still struggling with that polarity in our country. And these landscape geometries are opportunities to spiritually heal these traumas that were experienced within the pilot wheel. So we have also Marine Corps in the southern door, and up in the northern door we have the Moundsville, West Virginia, where the Hare Krishna temple is. So you have a spiritual temple up there that named after Krishna, who was a spiritual warrior, a blue man. He wore blue, or he had blue skin. And of course the Marines, they also wear blue. So one is one is a spiritual warrior and the other one is a physical warrior. So it's like it suggests this conversation between the balance of the spiritual and material. You spoke of Standing Stone being a big Bigfoot area, and right across from it, on the opposite side on this wheel, is the Great Dismal Swamp, where a lot of Africans escaped to as when they escaped to their slavery and started moving north, and they went out there into the swamps where nobody wanted to go. But I would assume that there's quite a few swamp apes out there too. So, and you also have the Serpent Mound, and you have the various Cherokees and all the various tribes that have suffered such, the Trail of Tears and everything. And certainly, everybody that's experienced the colonial crunch, including Bigfoot, have really gotten a lousy end of the deal a lot of ways. And so, this is a geometric that proposes that it's like a unity field, if you will. And, we have the big brothers are definitely out there. The forest people are out there, and it's somehow we have to make space for them to live. I mean, it's our humanity to do that. And so, they're part of our tribe. They're part of mankind. And somehow we got to figure out a way to which to live together, just like we got to learn to live together between North and South, and all the various races that were here. And we have this kind of reluctant host that is the native people that really need to be respected and brought into the fold and given back the power that they know what this land is all about and how to operate it. How to operate Spaceship Earth is dependent upon everyone coming together, including the big brother who has the memories of the time, back to the dinosaurs. He was part of this culture, the mega fauna, the mega flora and fauna. And he has to live at night because the radiation is so high now that only us little hobbits can exist out in it. But we got to give space for him and his family to thrive. So I look at this as an opportunity for that, and it's like a symbol of unity between peoples. So that's what I'd like to say.
That was amazing. That was just amazing. All right, I've got a quick question, and then we're going to go to Dr. Trey for the last word. The Mayor Spiritual Center is in Myrtle Beach, where Mayor Baba set foot on this continent. And what can we think is opposite the Mayor Spiritual Center on the other side? We might not be able to do it here on the broadcast, but I might talk to you a little bit later. We have a major spiritual center here. And I'd just like to see what might be on the other side of the Pilot Mountain wheel. We'll talk about that later. I answered my own question, Pete. So anyway,
that would be Serpent Mound.
Pardon?
Serpent Mound.
Okay. Cool. I'll look at that and we'll see what we can come up with. This is just fascinating. Dr. Trey Dunaway, you get the last question tonight on the great ScaryCast. And thank you so much.
Talking about Serpent Mound and Native Americans, when you live in a place for thousands of years, you get to know it pretty well. And do your ley lines and your geometry deductions, do they correlate with ancient sacred places that we know of today that were once a sacred place for the Indians that lived on our continent before the Europeans came?
Yes, absolutely. I've developed a whole earth ring. I call them earth rings. An earth ring system in North America. Actually, I've identified them worldwide right now. I'm going to put together an encyclopedia of earth rings here one of these days. But if you take the arc of the Mississippi River generated by the radius of the length of the river from New Orleans up to Lake Itasca, Minnesota, that creates an arc across the country. And it so this goes to New York City, a sacred site, It goes up through Onondaga and the Finger Lakes, a sacred site. It goes through Sault Ste. Marie, center of the Great Lakes, another sacred site. Arcs through Lake Itasca, another native sacred site. Across to it goes right through. I think it goes right through Pipestone and the Black Hills, and over down through to, if you take the same arc, if you will, it keeps on going down to the Four Corners of the Shiprock. So it's this. It's like it looks like a hand, if you will, with the Mississippi River and the estuaries is a lot like your handprint are all the rivers, and then you have all these various sacred sites on the way. So and the ley lines down to Teotihuacan. It just keeps on going. So every single one of these earth rings that I've identified around the continental body of North America, which incidentally is circular. Of course, the sacred circle of the native people is reflected in the land. And the center of that is in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. So I referenced that as the center of the circle of the continent, because if you draw an arc from Shelburne Falls out to the coast of California and Mexico, it creates this arc form in the lithosphere. And if you continue that around, it goes through the Mid-Atlantic Rift up through Iceland and Greenland and up to the magnetic field and back down around again. So
if our listeners or viewers were interested in seeing that graphic, is there a place where they could find that?
Yes, on geometryofplace.com. Geometryofplace.com is one of my websites that has quite a bit of information on it. It's an old HTML, so you'll get a warning about security. And then I also have a more recent site that a lot of this same information is on, called Pure Spirit Waters. That's plural in waters. purespiritwaters.org. And that's all about the Great Lakes as a sacred site, but it also includes information on how, about what I just described.
Well, I think that's notable to mention, so people that are interested can visit your websites and find out a little more information. I've really enjoyed this evening.
Thanks, Trey.
Well, thank you, Trey. That was a great last question. I smiled when you said, are there any? Trey, what was that first question? Because I knew it was going to be a good answer. What was that first question that you asked him?
Did these lines correlate to any known ancient Native American Indian sacred sites? And
they did, because I've done a little bit of research on what he did, and I thought that was, God, what a perfect question to ask. I guess, Pete, one quick question: that arc that goes through, you're talking about the four corners of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. Is that the four corners you were talking about?
Yeah. Shiprock is the center point, not those state boundaries, but Shiprock is a Navajo sacred site. It's called the Rock with Wings. It was an eagle that brought the Navajo people to the Four Corner area, and that arc is defined by the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and it's really what that arc is. It's kind of, these are biome structures, if you will, and that particular arc is the Colorado Plateau. So the Colorado Plateau is kind of like a geologic zone called a biome, as is the Piedmont in the case of Pilot Mountain Wheel.
Okay. Well, look, thank you. This has been wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and ask, will you come back and see us sometime soon?
I'd love to. Yeah, very fun. I'd love to talk about our elder brothers. They have some knowledge about this that I'm really into sitting down with them and getting a download of what they know about these earth energies. I think they have a tremendous repository of information on how to maintain our planet as a living sphere. And if we have to learn how to fly this baby, if we're to continue as a civilization.
I believe you're right. Well, Pete, thank you very much. Pete Champoux. He is our expert on sacred geometry and ley lines. I'd like to thank our co-host, Dr. Trey Dunaway. As wonderful as always, we had a great time with you, Dr. Trey. Pete, thank you very much. We want to have both of you back on this show. We might have another person or two that can contribute. But anyway, thanks a lot.
You're so welcome.
Another ScaryCast is in the books. So thanks a lot, Dr. Trey and Pete. And this is Dr. John signing off. We will see you sooner than later on the one, the only ScaryCast. Bye.
Good night.